Ishiro Honda once said that the tragedy of monsters is the fact that they are born too tall, too strong, and too heavy. And at least in the context of the films, he was right. These attributes have led to Godzilla having many disagreements with the Japanese military. But at least in the context of pop culture, these attributes have led to the opposite for Godzilla. They've allowed him to prosper and produce 28 movies. But I want to analyze this and discover what it truly is about Godzilla that attracts people to him and why he's been so endearing. And the only way to truly do that successfully is to review every Godzilla movie ever made. Some people might be angry, but regardless, welcome to Zazubaar's Godzilla Palooza. Greetings, Zilla fans. I am Zazubaar, and I have no idea why you exist. But despite my inability to comprehend why you exist, welcome to Godzilla Palooza. It's day 24, and today we're going to be taking a look at a movie that I was deeply considering to totally ignore. I have reviewed Godzilla 1998 well over 5 times. Now, perhaps the video wasn't actually called Review of Godzilla 1998, except for one, but that was a joke. I have reviewed the film, given my in-depth analysis and opinion of the film several times. So, when I sat down to start planning out Godzilla Palooza, I was ready to not review this film because I've reviewed it not only recently, but several times. I've given my thoughts on it on Chopper Pilot 5's channel, on my channel several times, and if I wanted to choose someone else that would deeply represent my opinion of the film, I would just say go watch Gorzard 8's channel, because he too kind of represents how I feel about the film. So I really have nothing new to say in this review that I either haven't said or haven't alluded to, or someone else hasn't said that I agree with. So I was full on ready to skip this film and just move on to Godzilla 2000, but here's what happened. I realized that I owe you guys something. I owe my subscribers who are real serious Godzilla fans who love the character just as much, if not more so than I do, and I owe you guys something. I owe you guys a in-depth solo analysis of Godzilla 1998 because you guys are loyal to me and you guys are amazing and just incredible subscribers and fans, and I couldn't ask for better ones. So I feel like you guys deserve to hear my unadulterated feelings and thoughts about a film that is infamous in all of our minds. Well, most of our minds. So when that thought struck me, I said, you know what? They've earned it. I'm going to give them an in-depth Godzilla Palooza analysis of Godzilla 1998. So that's why we're here today, and that's why I'm recording this video. So, yes indeed, we are going to be taking a look at Godzilla 1998. I have a couple things I want to say before we get into the review. One, I acknowledge the fact that fans of this film do exist. I acknowledge that there is quite a large variety of people out there who think this is a great movie. I acknowledge your existence, and I can respect, to a degree, your opinion. I can respect someone's enjoyment of the film, and I can respect someone's enjoyment of a film of this film in particular, especially more so if they're not a fan of the original Godzilla. If there are people out there who love this movie, who have no idea who the original Godzilla is, and don't care about that, I can acknowledge and not respect, but I can acknowledge why you would like this film and would be a fan of this film, because it's all you know with the Godzilla name on it. So I can understand that because you probably saw this film at an early age, and this film probably played a big role in who you are today. I can respect that. But I must ultimately tell you, your fandom is misplaced. Godzilla 1998 is nothing more than an insulting, generic, and basically been there, done that monster movie that has the nerve to put the title of Godzilla on the box. So I can respect that you're a fan to a degree, but here's where I can't respect you. If you come over to me and acknowledge the existence of the original Godzilla and still call yourself a fan of Zilla, and say to me, the 1998 Godzilla is better than the Japanese Godzilla, I can no longer respect your opinion. And here's why. The reason why the original Godzilla films have the large fan base that they do, and have the extremely defensive and sometimes criticized fan base that they do because of their defensiveness, is because Godzilla is one of the most unique and most loved and unique characters in fiction. That is why there is a large fan base for him. What makes the 1998 Godzilla undeserving of having the fan base that for some reason it has is the fact that it is a generic, been there, done that monster movie. I have seen dozens of films with this exact same plot, and most of them are better than this because they were made 40 years before this movie was even in production. They were made with charm and were made at a time where these kind of movies were popular, and these movies were dealt with some sort of respect. What makes me look down upon and hate the 1998 Godzilla, aside from being an adaptation of my favorite movie of all time, is the fact that it condescends and treats like it's above the genre that it is taking its source material from, and a genre that I would boldly claim is my favorite genre in film: monster movies and horror movies. Godzilla 1998 seems to think that no, bad 50s, that's not how you make a good monster movie. Here's how you do it. Bad 50s. That's why I hate this movie. And that's why I've decided to change my mind on doing this film separately on ZMMR on this very same day. Because I feel like I can basically say the same feelings for both this being a Godzilla movie and for being a monster movie. Because I feel like whatever is wrong with this film as a Godzilla movie that I'm going to deeply criticize can be adjusted to monster movies, because monster movies were the after product of the popularity and sheer awesomeness of the original Godzilla. So when this movie comes around and says that it's better than that, better than the original Godzilla, and better than the monster movie that spawned off of it — yes, I understand that there were movies before that, we'll get to that — then I can basically summarize my criticisms in both fields and basically say that in the same review. So that's why I'm not doing this movie on ZMMR yet, and that's why I'm not doing it today. So I will be bringing back ZMMR after Godzilla Palooza is over, though, with a review of the original Alien. However, back to 98. That's my overall feelings of the film. It is an insulting and condescending piece of mediocre crap. And that's why I hate it. However, when I was a kid, I absolutely loved this movie. This was one of my favorite movies when I was about 7 or 8 years old. I was a huge fan of Godzilla, but I was also a huge fan of this movie. But I think the reason why was, 1, because I was a kid, and 2, because I had already learned the difference between continuities. I had learned the difference of that film, that film sometimes took place in different universes. I was an obsessive freak over the original Godzilla and the Godzilla series, but I also loved and watched the 1998 film constantly. And it was only when I was about 9 years old that I began to question this film and began to fully realize the implications of its title. It was only then that I began to realize that this movie is awful. And that's why I, unlike a large majority of people you can find on YouTube who will make videos about how awesome this movie is, I had left that group and devoted myself to Godzilla, to the real Godzilla. So I no longer love this movie, and it is ultimately a big part of my life, and I can't deny that. It wasn't the thing that got me into Godzilla, but it is one of my early memorable movies. So that almost makes me hate it more, because it duped me into thinking that it was so good and maybe even better than the Japanese Godzilla and better than the films that it was inspired by. Before we get, we're not even really into the review yet, and I apologize for that, but I just have so much to say about this movie, and I owe you guys this analysis, so please bear with me. The other thing is the fact that this movie is based on source material. I've already covered this, in the past few minutes, but I wanted to go into it in a little more detail. The fact is that this production team acknowledged that this film is based on a very specific source material. They acknowledge that there was a Godzilla series and wide variety of monster movies that predate this and that they drew inspiration from. They haven't said this, but I can definitely see where some of these aspects come from. But I believe that they looked at two particular movies. The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, a whole host of Ray Harryhausen films, and that's, in line with Beast, and the original Godzilla. And I think that when they watched those movies, they said, no. We're going to do this in a generic Hollywood fashion. We're going to make Independence Day 2 with a giant monster. And like all sequels, it gets worse as you go down the franchise. And yes, I'm aware that there is an Independence Day 2 happening, and yes, I too am confused on why that's happening, but it's happening. This movie does feel like Independence Day 2 for me, though. In that the plot's very similar, and it has the same level of mediocrity that Independence Day was so good at hiding. I actually really like Independence Day. I think it's potentially Roland Emmerich's best movie. Stargate for me is very disappointing, but I'm not going to review that. But Independence Day is, in my opinion, Roland Emmerich's strongest movie because, despite being mediocre crap, it's got Will Smith in it. And Will Smith can save any piece of crap. So, there's that. But the problem with Godzilla 1998 is that they chose a production team who had no respect for the source material. And I don't know why, as a movie studio, you would think that taking a production team who has no respect for the source material would make a good movie of any regard, whether respectful to the source material or not, if they don't respect the source material. If they don't respect the source material, you get a movie that doesn't have any passion behind it. And the past 10 years of Hollywood are extremely embodiment of what happens when you make a whole host of movies that don't have any passion behind them and you're just making movies to cash in a paycheck. That's what Godzilla 1998 is for me. And Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin have, well, mostly Roland Emmerich, but Dean Devlin is not innocent in this. Roland Emmerich has come out on several occasions and said that his film is better than the original Godzilla, both in character and, of course, the original Gojira. He hates the original Gojira. He thinks it's a piece of B-movie trash. He thinks the character of Godzilla doesn't deserve the fan base he has. Why in ever-living fuck would you want to make a movie about Godzilla then? It's just astonishing. Why? Is it because it's a known name and you want to make money off of it? Well then, Mr. Emmerich, I say, fuck you. Why wouldn't you, if you so desperately wanted to make a monster movie that was, you know, condescending and insulting to the genre, just make a movie that does that, not call Godzilla. Because I wouldn't care about it then. It'd just be a piece of shit. And I would call it a piece of shit and be done with it. With Godzilla 1998, I can't do that because it's making some reference to a character I'm a big fan of. So, I have to pay more attention to it, and I have to critique it on a level that I wouldn't critique if this movie was called Generic Monster Attacks New York City. I would review it once, say it's bad, and be done with it, and move on. But it's called Godzilla. And that, Mr. Emmerich, TriStar, and Zilla fans, is why I've reviewed this movie over 5 times. Because it deserves it. Because the level of insult and the level of condescendment and the level of badness based on source material is why I've reviewed this movie over 5 times, and why I won't let the dead horse be. Why I won't let it rest in peace. Because it doesn't deserve it. Dean Devlin has also come out and said things like, "We're making the Godzilla that the original authors intended." Do these people even know who Shigeru Kayama is? Have these people ever even seen a film aside from the original Godzilla just because they were forced to, directed by Yoshiro Honda? Do these people even know who Eiji Tsuburaya is? I have to ask these questions when someone says that kind of ridiculous statement. Why would Dean Devlin say that when he knows it's not true? Oh, I know. Because he's trying to market the movie and make it seem like more of a Godzilla, more like it's paying respect to the fans than it actually is. Or is even kind of. Or not paying respect to the fans, but saying to fans, hey, you know all those cheesy effects that you guys always had a slight problem with? By the way, I don't. We're going to fix that, and we're going to give you the real Godzilla in CGI with updated effects and a bigger budget. Alright, sounds alright. We're happy with that. But they didn't do that. They took the name and then did their own thing with it. So, it's okay. So I'm a Batman fan, and I know that a lot of people hate Batman and Robin because it's not really a Batman movie. That it gets the tone wrong. And this is also why a lot of people hate the 1966 version, because they consider it a bastardization of the character, of the core of the character. So, for the same reason I hate Godzilla 1998. That's why I can't let the dead horse be. Batman and Robin was kind of this anyway, but imagine if, and I don't think there are anyone out there who would consider themselves a fan of Batman and Robin. So, okay, I was about to say, imagine a Batman movie that came out, and this is not what Joel Schumacher said. All right, so imagine that some guy decides to make a Batman movie, and decides to say, the comics are stupid and the animated series is stupid. I just want to use the name and make a superhero movie about a guy who dresses up like a bat. And the premise was that it followed a male prostitute who got bitten by a radioactive bat and decided to build a cave filled with gadgets and go put on a costume that looked like a bat. And he said that version was more sophisticated and more interesting than the original Batman. Than, the Batman character that we all know and love. That's what Godzilla 1998 is for me. So, with all that said, I suppose we should get into a little more detail. I have gone on for 20 minutes about how awful this movie is and tried to express, especially to people who consider themselves Zilla fans, why I hate this movie. And I will never ever cease to hate this movie. So, Zilla fans, I don't know why you exist, but you do, and I guess I have to deal with that. But, don't ever for a second think that I'm going to back down on my hatred of this movie. In no way, shape, or form will you be able to convince me on any level that this film deserves any commendability or praise over the original Godzilla. Or any commendability or praise at all, because it doesn't deserve it at all. Nothing. Nothing about this movie is original enough or interesting enough or, anything that deserves commendability or praise. The only thing that this film does right at all is the special effects. That's it. And even then, it doesn't deserve that level of commendability and praise, because Jurassic Park did it 5 years earlier. So, with that said, let's get into Godzilla 1998, 20 minutes into the review. The plot goes like this. A Japanese fishing boat in the South Pacific, I'm already facepalming, is destroyed by a giant monster. No flash of light. It's just a tail that whacks into a tower and sinks the boat. One of the fishermen comes ashore on French Polynesia, or somewhere where the French people can get a hold of him, and tells them that a monster called Godzilla sank their ship. Apparently, somehow, this is the French's fault, and the monster continues to destroy boats on its way to the United States. A character named Nick Totopoulos, played by Matthew Broderick, is brought in to investigate the incidents when the monster continues to make its advance on Manhattan. Finally, during a rainy day, the monster advances on Manhattan and walks through the street and causes some damage, most of which we don't see. The monster disappears. I don't know how. It's not explained. And we have a bunch of boring human drama introducing characters such as a news assistant named Audrey, her friend whose name escapes me, I think her name is Lucy, and her friend and cameraman Animal. God, that name is strange. And you know what's funny? Hank Azaria is an actor I really like, and I really kind of like his character in this movie, but just he can't save it even kind of. And the fact of what he's in, Hank Azaria, just why? I like you and you had to be in this anyway. So the film basically progresses as people try to do something about the monster. The monster returns, fights a squadron of helicopters. Somehow, even though clearly being hit a couple times by the bullets, isn't phased, destroys the helicopter squadron, runs amok through the city, disappears again. I don't know how to summarize this plot because it's so completely simple. Basically, the monster, now for some reason we're calling it Godzilla. Whatever, we'll call it Godzilla for this review because that's what they call it in the movie. Reveals itself to Nick to be pregnant. We'll get to that in a minute. And Nick wants to go down into the sewers and find the nest and destroy all the eggs. We'll get back to that in a minute as well. Audrey steals a tape from his tent that reveals secret information about Godzilla that the government doesn't want leaked. I don't know why, but they don't want it leaked, so whatevs. So, the government kicks Nick off the project because they don't like his face. I don't know. Nick decides to leave and return to wherever he lives. They don't say where. And a French secret agent named Philippe kidnaps him and takes him to some sort of secret warehouse where they're planning to do a raid on the nest because somehow Godzilla's their fault. Alright. So, Nick and all these French people go down into the sewer to try and destroy the nest, find it. They attempt to blow up all the eggs, but apparently they didn't bring enough explosives. I know, I said the same thing. We're gonna need a bigger bomb. Huh. All the eggs hatch and reveal themselves to be velociraptors, and they all chase around the French people and Nick. However, being a blonde New Yorker, and yes, I'm allowed to make that joke because I live in New York, Audrey and Animal decide to go down into the sewers following Nick and the Frenchies, and decide to also go through the nest and film stuff. I'm not entirely sure why they go down there. So the baby Godzillas, otherwise known as velociraptors, chase them too. There's a really boring and goofy chase scene. They end up in some sort of office. By the way, this is in Madison Square Garden. As Animal says, he wrecked the garden. Yeah, I've been there. Bummer. I apologize for my voice. I just can't take this movie seriously and seriously summarize the plot without making fun of it. By the way, I almost wish I could bring in Gorzard and Chopper Pilot 5 so that way we could just do a commentary on the movie and tear the movie apart, because it's extremely difficult to review it with some degree of serious analysis on your own, because it's a completely stupid movie to even try to analyze. And this is one of the few times that I agree with Roger Ebert about a Godzilla movie, so strange, because he said too that there's no way that you can possibly, you know, take it seriously, or you just kind of gotta let it happen, otherwise you're gonna think it's painful. So anyway, excuse me for that. So basically what happens is they run around, they go up into the office, they create a live broadcast so that way everyone can see the baby Godzillas, and the Air Force decides to now believe them and launches an airstrike on Madison Square Garden, because, you know, that's not going to piss anyone off. Blows up Madison Square Garden. Bummer. Kills all the baby Godzillas. Unfortunately, Nick and his companions escaped. Sigh. Everyone thinks everything is fine because earlier in the film they believe Godzilla to be dead because they shot him with missiles that missed him. Why? So Godzilla returns, bursts out of the whatchamacallit, ground. Sorry for that. Godzilla bursts out of the ground and begins to chase our characters because they killed his kids, and, you know, that's not good. I would be pissed too. So Godzilla chases them around in a taxi cab. I don't know. I apologize for this. I can't take this movie seriously in any way. Nick drives the cab onto the Brooklyn... Well, no, Nick doesn't do it. Philippe drives the cab into the Brooklyn Bridge. They get Godzilla caught up in a bunch of high-tension wires. By the way, I've been on the Brooklyn Bridge. There's no way that it would be able to support his weight. It would crumble in a matter of minutes before he could even get tangled up. Also, if he got caught up in the wires, the bridge would fall anyway. That's stupid. So the Air Force decides to launch missiles at Godzilla, which kill him. And then the movie's over. Everyone's sad, and then everyone's happy. Godzilla's dead. There's this really corny moment where Nick seems to feel sorry for him. I don't know why. Him and Audrey hug and make out. And then that's it. Oh, and after the credits, an egg hatches and there's a new Godzilla, and they're set up for a sequel that thankfully never happened. Oh my god, this movie's plot. I don't want to analyze it or really even talk about it too much because it's just so simple and done to death that it's just crap. Alright, so let me try and muster up some compassion to talk about this plot. It is an extremely basic monster movie plot. Monster causes mysterious incidents, monster attacks once, monster disappears, monster attacks again. There's some strange realization about the monster that leads to a long scene, a long stretch of the film that doesn't really involve the monster. And then the monster is killed, usually by an innovative and creative new weapon like the Oxygen Destroyer or that bullet from Beast from 20,000 Fathoms to kill the monster, and the main characters reveal their ingenuity. In this, it's missiles. Sure, you can say that because they were clever enough to lead him onto the Brooklyn Bridge to get caught up in the high-tension wires, that you can say, yes, their ingenuity came through. No, it didn't. They drove a cab onto a bridge and he got caught in the wires. There's nothing ingenuous about that. They all based it on Godzilla's stupidity. And not Godzilla's stupidity, this film's interpretation of Godzilla's stupidity. And then they shot him down with missiles. Where's the ingenuity in that? Where's the creativity? Where's the tension? You could argue that it's just like the original King Kong. They got him up onto in that film, they got him up onto a building and they shot him down. No, it's not. The original King Kong, that was an interesting and sad plot point and a creative one because they were using Kong's newfound feelings and emotional connection to Andero to their advantage. This, it's just, of course, Godzilla would chase a cab onto a bridge and get shot down by missiles. It's just stupid and kind of an anti-climax, and not that the film was building to any sort of making sense climax, but it's, you know, in terms of generic literary analysis, this is indeed the climax of the film. Godzilla being shot down by missiles is just a really stupid and basic and just dumb idea. I mean, the ending of Independence Day was more clever than this. Sure, it made no fucking sense, but at least it was more clever. I mean, they had to take down the shield so that way they could shoot down the ships. Not really clever, but it's better than this crap. I mean, and this really cements this as an Independence Day continuation, because the whole problem with Godzilla is that he runs really fast. So, they can't shoot at him. Cowardly and weak way to somehow represent Godzilla's indestructibility. Which this will bring us into reusing Godzilla plot points and making them dumber in Godzilla 1998. Making Godzilla run fast to somehow represent indestructibility is one. The others are the use of the atomic origin. In the original Gojira, you never saw one mushroom cloud in that film. Dr. Yamane was simply theorizing that Godzilla was born from the hydrogen bomb. In this film, the first 5 minutes of the movie are a hydrogen bomb test in French Polynesia. Here's the really weird thing. In the original Gojira, it was not said, but it was implied that it was an American hydrogen bomb test that created Godzilla. In this film, it's the French. Why? From what Gorzard has told me, there was one atomic test in French Polynesia, and it was an underground nuclear test. Why on heavenly earth would you, Roland Emmerich, and Dean Devlin decide, hey, let's have Godzilla be born in French Polynesia? And why would you have the French be a big part of the story? One, why not the Japanese? Two, why even do it at all? It's just weird and just stupid and just doesn't make any sense, and it's just weird and dumb. And what really drives me crazy is the oversimplification of the theme of the original Gojira. The theme of the original Gojira was man's mistakes creating Godzilla. It's a lot deeper than that, but that's just the simplified version that this film tries to express. This film takes that theme and oversimplifies it to a kindergarten level. Here's what I mean. You take the French doing one atomic test in French Polynesia that creates quote-unquote Godzilla. And Godzilla quote-unquote destroys Manhattan. However, rather than simply having the blame be, or the repercussions of those events being the fact that Godzilla destroys the city, we actually see the French trying to solve the problem before we ever see Godzilla do anything bad. Yes, he's attacked ships, but he hasn't killed anyone yet, really. So it's an oversimplification that these people are telling us that we did a bad thing by testing the hydrogen bomb. Yes, the original Gojira had that idea, but it wasn't explicitly said multiple times like it is in this. I mean, it's just stupid and oversimplifying, and it makes the film feel less apocalyptic that we don't actually have the exemplification of Godzilla's destructive capabilities. We never see Godzilla in this film do anything destructive. The most destructive thing he does is dodges a missile that blows up the Chrysler building. It's just dumb, and it's not heavy-handed because this film has no theme or allegory to speak of, but it's just really stupid for them to oversimplify the themes of the original Gojira and still somehow defend the fact that this is better. It's just a really odd and dumb decision to have the French be the ones who create Godzilla. It adds nothing to the theme or allegory, and overall, it's just a really dumb plot point. The final one, and this is going to start to get into the interpretation of Godzilla, is Godzilla's atomic breath. This version has none. However, people consider this weird scene where he blows on some cars, they explode, and the fire carries on his breath and destroys a few other cars. Atomic breath. How is that, in any sense of the word, atomic breath? He breathes on some cars and they explode. I don't know what that is, but it's not atomic breath. And the thing is that Godzilla didn't have atomic breath in the original Gojira just because it looked cool. The reason why was because Ishiro Honda wanted to come up with a way that Godzilla could visualize atomic breath. So he came up, atomic radiation. So he came up with the atomic breath. And that became one of the trademarks of Godzilla. This thing, why a sonic strange thing that blows up cars? It's just really stupid and serves nothing in the story, and he only uses it twice, and neither times it's very impressive. I mean, Superman has that power, so why is it so impressive with this version of Godzilla? So, I mean, that's really the plot. There's nothing special or interesting about it. It really is just a bunch of rehashed ideas of just a cliched monster attacking story or monster on the loose story. And also, it's really poorly paced. After we finally see Godzilla, the film becomes incredulously boring. In that, it's just every scene is really boring and slow, and nothing interesting is happening, and all the characters are really bland, and even the scenes with the monsters are not that fun to watch. He's just running away from shit. How is that in any way entertaining? And that's all the movie is at that point. Nothing interesting or dramatic is happening in the story. It's just... The only thing that it's attempted is Audrey stealing that video from Nick. And even that's not all that interesting because the situation could be solved with, she stole it from me. But he doesn't even tell the government that. So, just really, really stupid and undramatic, and the story is very, very poorly paced. The part where the egg plot starts to take center stage is one of the most boring 40 minutes of any movie I've ever seen. So, this story is just so poorly paced, dull and done to death, and just a really simple and generic monster movie, and really boring because of that. And as a Godzilla story, it's basically a watered down, everything interesting about it taken out version of the original Gojira. So, and even that, it's very, very loose. So, just garbage and generic. Let's move on to the next thing that I have practically nothing to say about. Let's talk about the human cast. They're just dull and one-dimensional machines that somehow drive the story and expel dumb one-liners. That's a lot of fish. Basically summarizes how I feel about the entire cast. It's just that kind of writing that makes the entire cast likable, right? No, it makes them dull and one-dimensional. There's no development, there's no interesting qualities about each character that makes them unique and interesting to follow. They're just all machines to drive the story and spew dumb one-liners and have meaningless and trite dialogue. So, the human cast is boring and unmemorable and really stereotypical. Nick is the cliched, nerdy, social outcast who can't, who doesn't know how to operate properly in social situations. Audrey is the generic, I want to be bigger than I am, New York office girl who kind of reminds me of Rachel from Friends, just not likable. And just all the cast is like that. Major Hicks is just a generic military person. And the rest of the cast is all generic, one-dimensional stereotypes. Philippe is just a generic, mysterious French man. Nothing to say about him. He's kind of badass, but aside from that, no. I mean, the human cast is also just really poorly acted. Everyone is just really kind of generic, feels like they're forcing their lines, and really don't bring me passion or emotion to the script. So really poor acting and really poor writing. So the human cast is boring, unmemorable, one-dimensional stereotypes. So they can't drive the movie. They have way too much screen time, and they're played up to be more interesting and more likable than they actually are. So the movie is bad for that as well. So let's talk about now easily the worst aspect of the film. Let's talk about Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin's interpretation of Godzilla. Oh god. Where do I start with this thing? This version of Godzilla is one of the worst interpretations of a past character that I have ever seen. It looks nothing like Godzilla. It's too hunched over, it's too small. The spines are weird. They're curved almost like, you know how a lot of people call Godzilla's spines dorsal fins? These look like shark dorsal fins. The head looks long and ugly, and it looks like a weird, just fucked up thing. And the body is just, it looks too much like a T-Rex, and it isn't original or memorable at all. It's a T-Rex with a giant head on it and dorsal fins. So it's a really dumb looking thing, and just really a poor interpretation of Godzilla. He's too hunched over, he's too generic, the spines are wrong, the face is wrong, everything about it is wrong. And don't defend the design, because it's trying to be an interpretation of Godzilla, so it's bad in any way you look at it. It's just a really bad monster design. It's generic, it's uncreative, and it's just a poor monster design. Easily my least favorite part of it is probably the head. The head is just bizarre, ugly, un-Godzilla appearing. I don't know what to call it. It looks like a tuna's head. So it's just dumb looking. So let's talk about his characteristics. He's a dumb animal. And Godzilla was never just a dumb animal. He was always a force of destruction. And this thing is not a force of destruction at all. It doesn't cause any destruction, because if it tried to, it'd probably get killed. Oh, excuse me. That was a bad voice crack. Excuse me for that. I apologize for that. Ignore that. It's very clear that if this thing tried to destroy a building, it would probably get crushed. For one, it's smaller than most of the buildings in New York. Two, it doesn't even try to destroy any buildings. Three, it has to run away from all the gunfire and missiles that are thrown at it. And just overall, it's just a really stupid and animalistic and just simple monster that doesn't seem to want to cause any destruction. And that's a poor interpretation of Godzilla. I mean, one of the big things that separates Godzilla from other giant monsters is his clear want to destroy things. All giant monsters before Godzilla did not intentionally destroy buildings. It was often accidental. In The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, the Beast itself walks through the middle of the street and causes very little destruction. In the original Gojira, Godzilla walks right through buildings and destroys things with his atomic breath and clearly wants to cause destruction. This thing just walks through the middle of the street, knocks a few windows out, runs through a few buildings but doesn't even knock them down, and you get the sense that overall very little property damage was caused, and that it almost seems like the government is overreacting to the problem. Like, there's no way that this thing would be causing this much ruckus that it is, because it's really just an overgrown animal that is just running amok that needs to be put down. There's no terror or loathing about it like there was in the original Gojira. So it's just a really, really awful interpretation of Godzilla. Everything about it is wrong. They get nothing right. The characteristics are wrong, the design is wrong, everything is wrong. Do I even have to get into the fact that the thing lays eggs? I mean, that kind of speaks for itself, doesn't it? I mean, well, okay. Not the fact that it lays eggs, but the fact that it reproduces asexually. What? How? Why? What does that have to do with Godzilla? More importantly, what does that have to do with the plot? The egg plot just seems to happen and then it's never referred to again. Once they blow up the nest and then Godzilla is attempted to be killed, the eggs are never brought up again. It's a dumb, unnecessary plot point that only seems to do one thing. Rip off the velociraptors from Jurassic Park. I think that Roland Emmerich and TriStar just wanted to have a scene where the characters are running away from velociraptors just like in Jurassic Park. The scene where they run away from the baby Godzilla is very, very similar to the scene where the kids and the cast of Jurassic Park outmaneuver the velociraptors inside the InGen building in Jurassic Park. It's very, very similar. The fact that they lock doors and go up elevators and stuff is just very, very similar to Jurassic Park. And just that scene is clearly just there to market to the people who really like Jurassic Park. I apologize, this review is getting incredibly unnecessarily long, and my score of the film should be overall enough to summarize my feelings, but I have a couple more things I want to say. So overall, this version of Godzilla is just an awful interpretation. The characteristics are wrong, the design is wrong, the asexual reproducing velociraptor thing, why? It's dumb. Just stupid. And has nothing to do with Godzilla and just seems to be there to rip off Jurassic Park. So, I absolutely hate the version of Godzilla in this film. It's a generic animalistic monster with no defining characteristic and no characterization to speak of. He's played with some level of tragedy because he's a new creature that is destroyed and it's stupid and has nothing to do with Godzilla. And the attempt at making you feel bad for the thing doesn't work because it's just an animal. And more than that, it's an animal that there's no emotional connection. And the main reason for that is because Godzilla doesn't seem to show any love or affection for its brood. It just seems to be having a brood because it wants to create a species. There's only one scene that seems to show some love or affection for it, when Godzilla rubs his nose up against a dead baby Godzilla and seems to be saddened. That's it though. There's no indication that he takes care of the things. He just kind of drops off fish and leaves them to their own devices. So overall, it's just a really stupid and untragic and just poor interpretation of Godzilla that makes me want to cut myself. So I absolutely hate this Godzilla. It's a poor interpretation in every sense. The only thing I even kind of like, and this isn't even all that good, is the roar. The roar is an interesting, if not entirely pointless reworking of the classic Godzilla roar. And overall, it's slightly okay. I like that it's very echoey, but even that can't save the design because the design is awful. So, just a poor interpretation of Godzilla. And because of that, because of those characterizations, there's no themes or allegory in this film. Nothing about taking revenge on humanity. Nothing about this being an after product and teaching man a lesson. Nothing about that. It's just a generic monster movie. So there's no themes or allegory in this film. It attempts to have some kind of profound hatred of man at the end with there seem to be some sadness behind Godzilla's eyes when it dies, but nothing comes from it, and it's just a stupid shot. So I apologize if I'm not coming off as very analytical, but I just can't review this movie without just losing passion because it doesn't have any passion behind it, so I really can't passionately review it if it itself doesn't have any passion behind it. My only passion for this film comes with hatred, and you can only hate something for so long without getting bored. So let's start to wrap this up, shall we? So no themes or allegory. It doesn't attempt to have that. it's just a generic monster movie. So let's talk about the last thing I want to discuss. Let's talk about the effects of the film. This is the only good thing about the film. The effects are great. The CGI is very convincing, extremely organic appearing, and there's a good mix of animatronics and CGI. So the effects are fantastic and extremely lifelike for 1998, and better than things we have in Transformers and such. So the CGI is fantastic, well done, and Godzilla, the creature itself, looks very convincing as an organic being. And the baby Godzillas too look great. I mean, they look very organic and they look fantastic. So the effects are fantastic and well done and entirely convincing as organic creatures. So they just don't have any of the passion behind them that the Godzilla suit effects did. When you saw Godzilla as a suit, it was just entirely convincing and badass to see him that way, because he had weight to him. This Godzilla doesn't have any weight. It's just it's a convincing looking CGI dinosaur. So it may be awesome, but it has nothing on Zazubaar and Toho suit effects. So I think the effects are great for the time. So the last thing I want to discuss before we go to rating is the film's music score. I wasn't even going to give this its own section because it doesn't deserve it, because it's just generic pop songs from the time. Its main song is a nice pop song, but what does it have to do with the film? It's called We Can Be Heroes, and fine, it's a decent song, but has nothing to do with the film. And overall, the pop songs make this a very unmemorable film because when you hear the songs, you're just thinking about the songs and not about their connection to the film. So I think the pop songs they're nice songs, but they're out of place and they're stupid, and just the soundtrack of this film is just very, very generic and unmemorable. So and that's really how I feel about the movie overall. It's generic and unmemorable, and just a terrible interpretation of Godzilla. None of Ifukube's music is used. Shame on you. So it's just a terrible soundtrack. Well, it's not a terrible soundtrack, it just doesn't fit the movie, and I've criticized Godzilla films in the past for that, and this one even more so because the soundtrack doesn't even kind of reflect Godzilla. So, bad. So the music score is just generic pop songs and ultimately summarizes how I feel about the film. Generic and not even kind of Godzilla, so just the soundtrack is generic. So that's really all I have to say about Godzilla 1998. It's an insulting, condescending mess of a movie that can't decide if it wants to take itself seriously, can't decide if it wants to be a monster movie or a disaster movie, rips off Jurassic Park, isn't Godzilla, is unmemorable, confusing, and overall just a mess. It's a terrible movie, especially a terrible Godzilla interpretation, but it somehow manages to be somewhat entertaining if you completely and utterly turn your brain off. If you just stop any and all thoughts from your brain, it is slightly enjoyable. But only on the level of, it's just a generic Hollywood popcorn movie. So, it's just a terrible interpretation of Godzilla and a terrible monster movie. So, because we're reviewing this film on Godzilla Palooza, and I'm looking at these things in terms of Godzilla, I have to give Godzilla 1998 a 0 out of 5. It's not even kind of Godzilla, it's insulting to Godzilla, and the fact that the production team looks down on Godzilla as silly and just uncommendable and just not worth any thought, the film deserves a 0 out of 5, doesn't deserve any commendment. Just nothing. It's just a generic piece of crap, and just because we're reviewing this on Godzilla Palooza, it deserves a 0 out of 5. So hate me if you want, Zilla fans, but guess what? This doesn't deserve your fandom. It's generic garbage. Get over it. So go watch the Japanese Godzilla, please, and realize that this film is generic garbage. So 0 out of 5 for me. I don't even know why I'm reviewing it. It has no place on Godzilla Palooza, but because I am reviewing it on Godzilla Palooza, I have to give it a 0 out of 5 because it's insulting to Godzilla, has no connection to Godzilla, and overall is just terrible garbage. So 0 out of 5 for me. I could go on for hours about this film, but if I do, I feel like we're never going to move on to the saving grace. I really could start crying right now because Toho, a year later in Japan, 2 years later in America, after the insulting mess of Godzilla 1998, they realized that they had to make a comeback. That they had to show people that that's not what Godzilla is. They had to bring back the real Godzilla and give a breath of fresh air to his fans that, hey, I know that was bad, but hey, we're still here and we can still make you feel good about yourself. When we get into 1999's Godzilla 2000 Millennium. I'll see you guys tomorrow for that review. Sayonara.